So by now, you should have a good understanding of what Visual Studio 2008 and the .NET Framework are, as well as what you need on your machine in order to have them running and installed. Now what happens? It's time to choose the appropriate architecture and solution template to begin writing your code. As a developer or architect, the first thing you need to do before writing a single line of code is to decide what type of system are you building. You have many different choices in Visual Studio 2008. Let's go ahead and launch Visual Studio 2008. In order to determine the architecture that's best for you, you'll first need to understand what your options are. Let's take a moment to review the different options. Later on, we'll write code and develop these types of applications in Visual Studio 2008. So Visual Studio 2008 is a single tool that you can use to program a variety of different .NET applications for both the web and the desktop. For those of you who have used Visual Studio before, you'll see the list of project templates has expanded quite a bit since previous versions. Select File, New, Project. As you can see in 3.5, we now have a much richer list of applications that you can work with in Visual Studio. In terms of Office applications in 3.5, you can see that the list for Office add-ins, Outlook, InfoPath, and Word is much more rich in 3.5 versus 2.0. Likewise, from 2.0 to 3.0, there hasn't been much changes. 3.5 adds a considerable amount of choices such as Visio add-ins, Excel templates, Word templates, and SharePoint sequential workflows. Let's walk through all the different tools that you have available in Visual Studio for all the different types of applications that you have. One option when choosing an architecture is to select web applications. You can do this for both Visual Basic, C#, or any of the other .NET languages that you have available. A web application is typically a browser-based application that reaches many users. The advantage is that your code is centralized in one place, on the web server or web farm. With Visual Studio 2008, you would use ASP.NET 3.5 to work with the system.web namespace. You choose this sort of application, web application, or website when you want your browser to be the container for your application. It's best suited for an environment where the user has live connectivity in order to interact with a web farm. Most of the time, all the user needs is a browser. You can access this application by selecting Web and selecting ASP.NET Web Application, or you can cancel out of this and say File, New, Website to select an ASP.NET Website. The difference between an ASP.NET Website versus the .NET Web Application is that a web application will be compiled into a DLL, whereas in a website, the best practice is to store the code behinds in an app code directory. We'll cover this in greater detail when we get to the web applications in this series. Select File, New, Project. Under Web and .NET Framework 3.5, you'll notice another option, ASP.NET AJAX applications. You can create a server control extender, and by default, ASP.NET Web Applications also support the AJAX programming model. Visual Studio 2008 provides integrated support for AJAX applications. AJAX enables you to program web applications with a mix of both server and client-based programming. Visual Studio 2008 even enables you to extend your existing ASP.NET server-side controls with additional client-side programming. Later in this series, we'll show you how you can take an existing ASP.NET application and AJAX enable it. The integration of ASP.NET AJAX into Visual Studio is one of the biggest enhancements. We'll be covering AJAX in detail later on in this series, but let's take a quick little sneak preview of AJAX in action. Let's open up the browser where we have the AJAX Control Toolkit. You can download this to your local machine, or you can go ahead and run it from the ASP.NET website. Let's take a look at one of these controls, such as the drag panel. This sample application provides samples for all the different types of controls that are located in the ASP.NET AJAX Control Toolkit. One of these controls is called Drag Panel. As you can see, when I mouse over the Drag Me title bar, my cursor changes to a movable icon. By dragging, you can see that I can move my small little window around and dock it inside my web browser. This is a perfect example of using both client-side and server-side scripting to be able to develop a website. As you can see, ASP.NET is no longer simply about developing a website with server-side programming. Combined with AJAX, it enables you to combine the best of both worlds so that you can provide a superior user experience. Let's go back to Visual Studio.